playing around with something in another class. So let's kind of go back where we left off. So we were talking about different types of goods, and we'll kind of review some traits and then kind of look specifically at public goods today. I don't think we probably have time. We might get to common resources, but if not, we're going to save that for longer. So we talked about goods being excludable or non-excludable, right? So this is the idea, that once someone buys something, right, or is using something, it's excludable if nobody else can use it, right? So this is like if I buy something to eat, right? Once I eat it, no one else can use it, right? So then non-excludable would be a good where once it's out there, once it's produced, right, anyone can consume it. So this is the idea of public parks, right, national defense. Like once it exists, anybody who wants to use it can use it. Rival and non-rival. Rival was that once I use a good, that particular unit, no one else, it's gone, right? No one else can like use this good at the same time as I am, right? This is the idea of like food, right? Or if you have a specific ticket, once I'm in that seat, no one else can buy that specific seat. Non-rival is the idea that multiple people can be enjoying or using or getting marginal benefit from this good at the same time. So this is music on iTunes, this would be like national defense, the interstate, right? So we can all use these goods at the same time and all derive marginal benefit. So we have these different combinations of these characteristics. And we said that specifically public goods would be non-rival and non-excludable. Right? We then also have natural monopolies, right, which are things like cable. So it's excludable. People can't just use it, right, without paying for it. But it's non-rival in the sense that you can have several people using cable at the same time, right? So they're all using the same cable line or electricity or something like that, right? We can all use the same electric lines, but it's excludable in the sense that we can't just use them without paying for it, right? A non-excludable and non-rival like a public good, right? Everybody can, I put lighthouses here, but everyone can use national defense at the same time, and we can't be prevented from enjoying the benefits of national defense, right? Once it exists, everyone in that country can enjoy the benefits. So the other two we had, excludable and rival. These are like the majority of goods. So these are, food, any item you can think about buying, clothing, right? You have to purchase it. It's rival in the sense that once I buy this particular unit, no one else can use that one unit. It's excludable in the sense that I can't use it without paying for it, right? Like, a non-excludable would be like a public park, right? I can use it without paying for it. We then have rival and non-excludable goods. So these are common resources. So this was like the idea of a pond, right? Anybody can go, well, if there wasn't government regulation, everyone can go use fish in a pond. It's non-excludable, but it's rival in the sense that once I catch a fish, no one else can catch that same fish, right? If I'm keeping these fish. So these different kind of types of goods, and we'll talk through how we could have one particular type, and depending on the characteristics, it could fit multiple categories. And then we'll kind of dive into the public goods. So we won't use these for clickers, but these would be good to go back and be able to understand what the differences are here. So let's assume that we had a road, right? We're thinking about a highway. Which one would be kind of best describe a public good? So if we go back, public goods or non-rival and non-excludable. So these are usually things that the government provides, right? That are made to be used by everyone. So if we had a road, how could it be non-rival and non-excludable? Well, it would be non-rival in the sense if we think about the different combinations of a toll road or congested versus uncongested. If it was a toll road, right, that's suggesting that you have to pay to use it. So that makes it excludable, right? If I had a toll road, it's an excludable road. You can't just hop on it. You actually have to pay to get on it. Right? If it wasn't a toll road, it is not excludable, right? I can just drive down the, whatever, I-69, like no problem, right? I can just hop on that road. Okay? So the characteristic of being a toll road or not kind of is being rival or not, right? You have to pay to use it in this toll road. So a public good, we said, is non-rival. Right? You don't have to pay to enjoy benefits from it. So we're looking at one of these examples where it's a non-toll road. Okay? In order for it to be a public good, it also needs to be non-excludable. Right? or sorry, not excludable. Already did that one. Non-rival. So it's non-rival in the sense that if I'm using the road, it doesn't prevent other people from getting benefit from using the road as well. So if I think about being congested or uncongested, would a congested road be rival or non-rival? Rival, right? If I've got a congested highway, you almost think about it to the extreme, it could prevent people from getting on the interstate, right? If it was so congested, traffic was so backed up, it's literally preventing people from enjoying use or enjoying benefit from that road because they literally can't even get on the entrance ramp, right? Or it's just decreasing their benefit, right? Because it's slowing down, right? It's taking them longer to get wherever they need to go. So if we want a public good, we want it to be non-rival, non-excludable. That would mean that it would have to be uncongested and not be a toll road. So we'll think about the different combinations of these characteristics. So what if I wanted a common resource? So if we go back, common resources were non-excludable and rival. So in order for it to be non-excludable and rival, non-excludable would mean that it can't be a toll road. I don't have to pay to use it. And then to be rival, it would have to be congested, right? Me using it makes, prevents other people from using it. Right? So a congested non-toll road would be an example of a common resource. Then if I said, what about a private good? So these are our kind of typical goods that we think about. They're both rival and excludable. So here, how could a road be rival and excludable? Well, it'd be rival if it's congested, prevents other people from getting on, and it's excludable if people have to pay to get on. So a congested toll road would be a good example of kind of like a private good. And we'll talk about some issues that exist with public goods and common resources, which, both of those we kind of said would be non-toll roads. So there might be a reason why toll roads make a little bit of sense to avoid some of the issues that we see rise up with public goods and common resources. But we'll get there eventually. But this is kind of a good way of thinking about it. And then, okay, so we've got our three different types. Yeah.
Would you say that suitable and not good if you have to pay for it?
Yes, that's the easiest way to think about it, right? If it's an excludable good, it's probably that you're going to have to pay to use it or give up something to use it, but usually that's money, right? Well, I didn't do one here, but we had one category we didn't go over, which was natural monopolies. So these were excludable and non-rival. So if I'm thinking about these roads, how could it be excludable and non-rival? So what would make it excludable? You've got to pay for it. So it would have to be a toll road. And how could it be non-rival? Wouldn't be very congested. I mean, I haven't been on it in a long time. I don't think it gets very congested. But you can kind of think about the toll road in Indiana. I don't know how you guys ever go up to northern Indiana, but that toll road, right, is basically a natural monopoly. Right? If you want to get somewhere quickly, right, that's the only, if you want to travel east to west in northern Indiana, there are other roads, it's going to take you way longer, right? The speed limit's lower, right? You got to stop through more little towns. But if you can hop on that toll road or across northern Indiana, you can just fly across from east to west, right? It's essentially a natural monopoly. It is both excludable, you have to pay to get on it, but it's also non-rival in that once you're on it, the traffic isn't so bad that like it's going to prevent people from getting on, right? And that's why a toll road is attractive, right? Because you can get places quicker. And so they have to kind of guarantee that it's not going to be congested and that it won't be, They want to make sure that it's not rival and that it is non-rival, right? They want to make sure that people can kind of get on it and people using it doesn't prevent others from using it. So that's the idea of why we have toll roads. They're kind of like government supported, like natural monopolies in a way. Although I think Indiana sold theirs, right? So now it's run by a company, but they're essentially still a natural monopoly there. It doesn't make sense to have two competing toll roads running right next to each other. So let's think a little bit more about these public goods. Right? So we talk about these different characteristics, these different types. Let's specifically talk about public goods and maybe a problem that arises. Okay? So let's say I've got this street lamp example. It's kind of a dumb example, but it makes sense, right? And the dollar amounts won't make sense here, but if you kind of think about a street lamp being a public good, right? Nobody's putting up their own street lamp. The town is doing it. So why does the town have to do it? So we know that for people, they would choose to buy something or they'll choose to purchase something up to the point as long as the marginal benefit is above the price, right? Or above the marginal cost. So let's say we had an individual and they were going to think about how many street lamps they wanted to put up on their street, but they have to pay for them. Okay? So we look at the different marginal benefits of having more street lamps, right? It's declining, right? Having one street lamp provides a lot of benefit, to having light on your street. The second one, yeah, it's nice to have more light. You can see more at night, but right, it's not as beneficial as that first one. And then as you start adding more and more, right, each one has a little bit less benefit. Eventually you get to a point where, everything's so light that adding another street lamp doesn't really provide any additional benefit. Let's assume the price was $35. Maybe this is like hundreds of dollars or thousands. I don't know exactly how much it would cost to put up a street lamp, but let's just use that price of 35 to kind of make this point. So this individual Tom, how many street lamps would he purchase? Right? And I don't know why I have this not equal to sign. I think it was copy and pasted from the other one. And I meant to have it as a show up later. But for that first unit, Tom would say, well, the benefit is greater than the price, so I'll build that first street lamp. And then we'll take the second one, okay, building a second unit, the marginal benefit is still greater than the price, so he builds the second one. He goes to thinking about buying constructing a third street lamp. Well, there the benefit of that third street lamp is a little bit lower than the price, so he wouldn't build that one. Right? So we end up with Tom choosing to build 2 street lamps here for his street. And that's just his private benefit. It's nobody else on the street. That's just his own benefit. Well, then maybe we have Jill, right? We'll just focus on Jill for a second. How many street lamps would Jill decide to build for herself? 0, right? The very first one only has a marginal benefit of 30 and the price is 35. So for Jill, she isn't going to purchase or build even 1 street lamp, right? Well, if we think about, so then between the 2 of them, how many street lamps do we have? 2 plus 0, so 2. So even though Tom decides to build 2, that's not the optimal quantity for society, right? With a public good, it's essentially like we've got kind of like positive externalities, where we end up seeing the quantity that society arrives at is lower than what's efficient for society. So let's think about the reason behind why. If we think about the marginal benefit to the entire street, here the entire street is only 2 people, but the same idea would apply if we looked at a street with 100 people on it. So to society, the benefit of having that first street lamp is the sum of everyone's benefits, right? So 50 plus 30, our society's benefits to that first street lamp would be 80. And a street lamp is a public good in the sense that once it's constructed, it's non-excludable and non-rival. You don't have to pay to enjoy having the light at night from the street lamp, and me enjoying the light at night, my neighbor can do the same exact thing at the same time. Right? So these street lamps are public goods. So once they're constructed, multiple people can enjoy the benefits of this good. So we'll add up everyone's benefit, right, from having these different quantities of street lamps on their street. And where would society kind of choose to build, or how many street lamps would they choose to build? Well, there, 80 is greater than 35, 65 is greater than the price of 35, 50 is greater, 35 is exactly equal to, we say they kind of construct these street lamps up to the point where the marginal benefit is equal to the marginal cost being the price. So for society, the efficient quantity here would actually be to build 4 street lamps. The problem is if we allow private individuals to construct these, Jill built 0 and Tom built 2. Right? So we have a much lower quantity than what would be efficient for society. You can almost think about it this way. So if we have this public good, multiple people can enjoy benefits. So let's say I had something like this, where I've got 3 individuals' demand curves, but remember, demand just reflects marginal benefit. So really, when I'm thinking about these marginal benefits to having different number of street lamps here, I'm really thinking about the demand, right? How much would people be willing to pay to build that street lamp? So we've got maybe 3 individuals here, right? And they all have some benefit to whatever the public good we're thinking about is. Right? Maybe this is national defense, an interstate, you know, whatever it is. The problem is going to be that let's assume the price or the marginal cost for whatever this good is well above each of these individuals' demand curves. So under this scenario, for that very first unit, for each person, if they're making decisions just based off of their own private benefit, none of them will choose to consume any of this good. It's too expensive. This would be like the idea of national defense. No one person values enough from national defense. Well, you know, maybe someone like, I guess maybe a billionaire, you could argue, like, if their company, you know, goes under because of there's no national defense and their country's taken over, maybe for them it was, you know, beneficial enough. But for the average kind of American or average citizen, no one benefits enough from having national defense that they're willing to pay for the entirety of our national defense. Now, society as a whole, we know benefits a lot from it, but any one individual, no one is going to find it valuable enough to pay for the entire sum of what it would cost to national defense. And maybe even if they did, right, demand of marginal benefit is the ability and or the willingness and ability to pay. So none of us have the ability to pay for the entirety of national defense. However, if we think about where is society's benefit here, or marginal social benefit, well, it would be the sum of all 3 of these demand curves. So remember when we go all the way back when we originally started talking about demand curve and the aggregate or the market demand curve, it was adding up every individual's marginal benefit. So here, kind of the marginal social benefit, or like aggregate demand here, probably is high enough that for society, we would like some optimal level of national defense, right? We want to provide some of this good, but for any one individual, they would all choose 0, and so we end up with kind of this less than socially efficient quantity. So the only way that we can get these public goods to be provided, right, if this is the scenario where every individual's demand is just too low, is if they somehow collectively come together and agree to each pay a small portion, right? And how does that look like in terms of like national defense and street lamps and things like that? Well, who provides those things? Government. How do they pay for them? Taxes, right? So we've identified that there's certain things that benefit society a lot, and that having, you know, a quantity above 0 is good for society, right? However, we've identified some of these things that no one person has the ability or willingness to pay for them. So what do? We each pay a little bit, and then we can all enjoy the benefit of having this good, right? Once the street lamp is built, once national defense is provided, once the interstate is built, we can all enjoy the benefits of these public goods. So this is kind of a pretty extreme example where not even one person would choose to buy some of these goods, but it's not that extreme in the sense that most of these public goods are just wildly expensive things that no one person could support. So we have to collectively come together, all pay a little bit, and then once we sum all our money together, we can provide this good, we get to that socially efficient quantity, where society benefits a lot. Any questions on that? Does that make any sense here? So, what do I have here? So yeah, we've got, basically you can think about it as, it's kind of like positive externalities where the socially efficient quantity is higher than the free market arrives at. So we allow individuals to make these decisions, we end up at an inefficient point. And so usually we have to use some type of government intervention or regulation, right, taxes, right, to raise money to provide these public goods. We kind of have a problem, right? And this isn't necessarily, we can get around this with the government by imposing penalties, right? But once a public good is provided, right, we have kind of a free rider problem, right? We go back here, you think about it as once once Tom builds those two street lamps, he can't prevent Jill from enjoying the benefit of those. So with public good, if someone builds or provides this public good, everybody can use it. It's non-excludable and it's non-rival. So we call the free rider problem that these individuals who didn't value it as much, who weren't willing to pay for the good, are still able to enjoy the benefit when other people pay for it. So this would be the idea of once a public park is built, even if I don't live in that community, I've paid no taxes in that state or that local government. If I'm in the area, I can use that park, right? I can free ride off the taxes that people in that area paid for that public good. This would also be, you can kind of think about it as if you're not paying taxes, right, or you're avoiding taxes, right, you were free riding off of all the other taxes that pay for things like national defense, improving the roads, providing, what's another good public good that we all to everything we see. Well, even the post office, right, in terms of kind of they're providing this service. So, you have this free rider problem, which is that people can still enjoy the benefit from this good, even if they didn't pay for it, right? Once that good is out there, once that public good is out there, anybody can use it, even those who didn't pay for it, right? So, how do we get around this? Well, we try to make sure that, people are paying their taxes, or we're trying to make sure that, that we might set up, so think about it this way, for one public good would kind of be like, you think about state parks or national parks. Anybody can go there, but what do they do at state and national parks? A lot of the times to get in them, you have to pay. So they've actually taken this public good, right? We all should be able to enjoy this area, but because they know there will be a free rider problem, people just come in and use the park. They won't clean up after themselves, right? They turn it from a public good, right? They make it excludable so that you have to pay. So if we have an excludable good, but it's also non-rival, goes back to being a natural monopoly, right? So these state national parks, right? If you want to go see like Devil's Tower or one of these like crazy, beautiful natural things, but there's only one of them, right? As soon as they make it excludable, they change it from a public good to basically a national monopoly. Right? If you want to go see Devil's Tower, you have to pay, right? To go, there's only one, so you'll have to pay to go into that park. So that's one way you can get around the free rider problem, is kind of turning some of these public goods essentially into natural monopolies. Right? It's also kind of like the post office. The government's done that as well. Right? They've made it excludable. Like you have to pay for some of its services. And so if we were just to, we'd send the mail for free, no stamps, that would be a public good. Like the post office, that would be a public good. But because they make it so you have to pay to send things through them, that turns it from a public good being excludable, which then it's excludable but non-rival. Well, now it's a natural monopoly, right? And it's a government supported natural monopoly. So, there's anything else I wanted to say here? And one thing that can occur, let's say that these three people all agree that they're going to pay a third for whatever this good is, right? So they know if they pool their resources together, they can all enjoy this public good, have whatever street lamps or whatever this public good is. But so they all agree to maybe build one street lamp piece. Well, the problem is, for some of these individuals, they know that if the other two people build their street lamps, but they don't build theirs, they'll still get to enjoy the benefits of having those two. And maybe for them, that's optimal. Right? They're okay with only having two. Maybe it was the other two individuals who really wanted to have kind of this higher quantity of three. So that one person might say, okay, we're going to build our street lamps. And this is kind of a little bit of a theoretical, like far-fetched idea of like, no one can see the other person building, right? They've already kind of agreed to put their money in, they pay the companies, if they all do it individually, well then, if two of those people decide to pay, the companies come out and construct them, and all of a sudden they're like, where's the third street lamp? They go to the third neighbor, well, they didn't pay. Well, now that those two street lamps are up, that third neighbor who decided to not build theirs, right, gets to enjoy the benefits of having the other two that their neighbors built, right? So this is kind of the free rider problem. Like he didn't have to pay for anything, but he's enjoying the benefits from these other two neighbors who did pay to build these street lamps. So this would be the idea of kind of how this free rider problem could play out when it comes to even not just like things to the government, but people just agreeing. It's very similar to the idea that we said, kind of like a prisoner's dilemma in the sense, right? There's always an incentive to be the one who doesn't pay for the public good because you're still going to get to use it, right? Let's think about it instead of street lamps, right? We're all agreeing to pay for national defense, but if I don't pay my portion, I still get to enjoy the benefit of national defense, right? There's an incentive for me to not pay because I'll still get the benefit without the additional cost, right? And so this is the idea of the free rider problem. Very similar to the prisoner's dilemma. So if everybody has this incentive to not pay, right, or not to kind of put money towards this public good, kind of that Nash equilibrium would be that we don't end up with that public good provided. Now it's a little bit different because in practice, how do we make sure that people pay? Well, we have income taxes, and if you don't pay your income taxes, you can potentially go to jail, right? So we had to create other incentive schemes to ensure that people don't free ride on these public goods, right? That they don't not pay their portion, but still then get to enjoy that public good once it's created. Any questions on this? We'll keep moving here. All right. So another way to kind of phrase this free rider problem. Oh, you got a perfect example. So, you guys, any of you guys have classes where you have to do group work? I hate group work. So, let's say you have 4 people in the group, right? You've got one person who says, I know the other 3 people are smart. I've got other classes. I'm not going to put any effort into this at all. They ignore all the emails. They never show up to meet with the group. They don't do any of the work. Well, if those other 3 students are good students and they want to make sure they get an A on this project, what are they going to do? They're just going to pick up the slack, right? So they're still going to get that project done, kind of the optimal quantity, right, of getting that project done. But that other person that did none of the work, they're essentially still getting to enjoy the grade, right? As long as that group project gets an A, if the agreement is that everyone in the group gets whatever the grade is that they got in the project, those 3 people pick up the slack, and that 4th person does no work, but enjoys that public good, which is a completed group project that got an A. So that would be another example of kind of this free rider problem. Now, what probably a lot of you guys have had these, hopefully your professors did this, right? What's one way they can incentivize, make sure that nobody free rides? They like ask you, how much work each of you did. I don't know, have you guys had a professor do that? Yeah, they should be doing that, right? So that's a way to check to make sure that there is an incentive, right, for everyone to put some effort in, otherwise they won't get the grade that group project got, right? If the other 3 people that report at the end, yeah, we all put in a third of the work, this other person did nothing, then that other person doesn't get to enjoy that public good, right? But if we don't have that scheme set up, where it's just, nope, you gotta find a way to work with each other, whatever grade you get on this group project, that's the grade all 4 of you get. Well, there's an incentive for individuals to free ride there. Does that make sense? Is it kind of something relatable? Hopefully not too relatable to that specific example, but so we can think of national defense. I use a lot. Really, any type of like firefighter, police department, right? You can think of an area; those are public goods. But one public good that we don't necessarily doesn't get mentioned a lot. If you think of like scientific research, so it is very difficult for any one person to fund some of the scientific research that gets done. So, maybe that there's for some goods, right? There are some like pharmaceuticals. There's enough incentive that companies start and they start doing research in those areas, right? Because the goods they produce, they know that people have a high ability and willingness to pay for them. But if it comes to something like scientific research into, I don't know, some obscure insects in the Amazon, well, there's not a huge demand from consumers out there that they're going to like pay to see the results of that research, right? But it might produce some positive externalities for society, right? Part of that research, they might discover, some type of, I don't know, this is not my field of expertise, but, some insect, venom or something like that allows them to, oh, actually, we could use this to treat some disease, right? There could be some of these positive externalities that come out of this research that isn't as highly valued by most people in society, right? So if we want some of this scientific research to occur, right, for goods that there isn't a high demand for, right, but would still be very beneficial to society to have more information about these things, we have things like public institutions, right? So you've got universities that fund this research. You've got government funding for a lot of this research as well, right? And you've got to apply for the grants and things like that. But a lot of the scientific research that's done is really a public good, because once the information is discovered, once it's out there, everybody gets to enjoy it, right? But for any one person, or if there weren't universities, nobody's probably going to self-fund to go do some insect research in the Amazon, right? So that's another good example. And really what it comes down to is you kind of have to trust, this is unfortunate because I don't necessarily know how anyone to do this, right? If the government is really the kind of the person deciding how much of our tax dollars go to fund certain public goods, we're really relying on them to do this cost benefit analysis, right? To determine what public goods we should be investing the nation's tax dollars into. Like I said, I don't necessarily trust them, but that's hopefully what they're doing. Anything else I wanted to say here? Yeah, so the government is attempting to do this to determine what public goods it's providing, how much money to put into national defense versus infrastructure. And sometimes they get it wrong. It's really hard sometimes to estimate what these benefits are. How do I really estimate the benefit of national defense? It's kind of tricky. There's ways you can do it looking at different measures, different variables, but it is very difficult to do. Common resources, where are we at in time here? 12:30. Let me see. So we've got, go through that. All right. I think this is what I'm going to do. We don't have enough time to really get through this today. We could save that for Monday. We skipped this coast theorem, so I think I'll go through this. So going back, I skipped over this, I think it was either Monday or Wednesday. But there's this interesting theorem, and it kind of relates to going back a little bit towards externalities, which is called the coast theorem. Right? So the coast theorem says, regardless of who has property, regardless of who has property rights, the individual who values the good the most will be the one that ends up with it. So if we allow people to bargain back and forth, it doesn't matter who starts out with the good, whoever values the most will end up with it because they'll be the person who's willing to pay the most for it. You can kind of think through a silly example, and I'll try to give you a more realistic. So let's say we've got, right, this old one, like kid books, right? Spot the dog. So we've got Dick and Spot. Right? Dick's the owner of Spot, and Spot barks a lot, and Jane hates it. Right? So there's this kind of huge cost to Jane. I'm hearing this dog bark constantly, but then Dick has this huge benefit to Spot, which is he loves this dog, right? He values having this pet. Right? So the socially efficient outcome, right, is going to be whatever maximizes these two individuals' well-being, right, or their kind of marginal benefit, right? The society's marginal benefit. Here, society is just these two individuals. Okay. So whoever values, right, if Dick values having the dog more than Jane is bothered by it, then the dog's going to stay in the neighborhood. However, if we think about it, Jane is so bothered by this that she, the cost to her is greater than the benefit that Dick enjoys from kind of having this dog. She potentially could pay him to get rid of the dog, all right? She'll pay more in terms of maybe getting some type of regulation so that the dog is taken away because I don't know, there's some she pushes for a noise complaint or something. It's kind of a goofy example, but this would be the idea. Whoever has a higher value is going to be the one who wins out. So let's think about the first case. Let's think about if Jane kind of has a higher cost to this dog barking than Dick does to having the benefit of owning this dog. Well, in this case, Jane would pay up to $800 to get rid of this dog. So if Dick only has a benefit of $500 to owning the dog, which for the terrible person, how could you only put $500 in owning a dog? But right, if this was a scenario, Jane could go across the street and say, here's $750 to get rid of the dog. If that was the case, what would Dick do here? Well, if he gets $750, right? If he's only going to take the money, right? If he doesn't value the dog that he has by more than $750, right? So yeah, maybe he takes the money and turns around and buys another dog, but he didn't value the dog he had that much, right? So if he doesn't value it as much as Jane is willing to pay him, he gets rid of the dog, right? As long as she offers him something over $500, he's losing the benefit of $500, but he's gaining a benefit of something above $500. Right? Now he might go out and buy a better dog that doesn't bark as much, but that's a different story. Just to piss Jane off. So, yes, spite, right? Adding some benefit of spite there, right? So if we just allow these two individuals to kind of work this out, maybe there's a price somewhere between $500 and $800 in which the dog would go away, right? It doesn't matter who has ownership, right? Dick originally owned the dog, but because he valued it less, the outcome that would end up seeing for society is that whoever valued, having and getting rid of the dog more is kind of the one that wins out. You can kind of think about there. So the post-theorem side is if we allow people to bargain with each other, the private outcome will basically be efficient for society. Right? You can kind of think about it if we had case two, let's say Jane has the legal right, right? Maybe there's some type of ordinance where if there's a certain noise, you can kind of force, you're in a homeowner association, you could force someone to get rid of their pet, right? If it's breaking these kind of noise rules, right? Well, if she has that right, then she chooses to get rid of the dog as well. So it doesn't matter who starts out with the right, right? In the first situation, Dick had the right to keep the dog because Jane valued getting rid of the dog more than he valued keeping it. She could offer him an amount of money to get rid of the dog, right? If she had the right to, no matter what Dick wanted to do, right? Even if he valued the dog more, if she has the right, she could say, you get rid of the dog, we end up with the same outcome. Okay? However, right, nobody kind of gets the, here Dick wouldn't get the money. So once again, we end up with the outcome being efficient for society because Jane kind of valued getting rid of this dog more than Dick valued kind of keeping it. Now, if we had the reverse, right? So let's say Dick values having the dog more than Jane kind of is costing her to listen to a bark. Well, here, Jane's going to go across the street. How much would she be willing to offer Dick to get rid of the dog? Up to her, up to that cost. So she'd be willing to offer up to $800, right? Anything past that, right? Yeah, she's getting rid of this cost of $800, but she'd just be paying $900. So she's actually increasing her cost by offering anything higher. Well, Dick says, no, I value having this dog by $1,000. So there's no price that Jane could offer him to get rid of the dog, and the dog stays. Now, oops, sorry, there we go. So here's kind of just the third case where if the valuations were flipped, right? It doesn't matter, whatever is better for society still ends up happening because here, when Dick values having the dog more, right? By keeping the dog, that it's actually better for society of that two-person society. So we can kind of work through examples like this. So like I said, it's kind of a easy one. I think I'm going to pull up on this. One more thing and get out here a little bit. So let's assume, I'll kind of put this in the context of sports. So let's say that there's some team and they have the best player. I don't know, choose your sport. Right? Football is pretty going on right now. So let's say they, the Indianapolis Colts, right, have a star player, right? and they value him at, I don't know, $15 million. Right? Maybe they get some rookie quarterback. Who's amazing. So if the Colts value this player by $15 million and they draft him, they have the rights. Right? There's been, I don't know who can pick on and spend a bunch of money. Actually, I don't really like them. So let's say you've got the Patriots, but they're in a bigger market, right? They have a higher fan base. So this same player, right, would generate a lot more money if he was on the Patriots instead of the Colts, right? Indianapolis being kind of a smaller market, there's just not as many fans. And so having a player, you can't sell as many jerseys, right? You don't sell as many tickets. So this is the idea, right? So there's two different teams and they have a different valuation of this player. So if the Colts start out with the rights to this player, what ends up happening? What do you think the Patriots would try to do? Try to trade or buy that player. And they would offer anything up to $50 million, right? So they'll offer, in whether or not that's $50 million cash or like $50 million in other players, right? They'll trade to end up with that player from the Colts. So what's the outcome? The player ends up on the team that values them the most, right? Or think about there, like what's best for society, right? So the way you would maximize kind of the benefits in this society of these two teams is for the player to end up on the team that values them the most. Let's just, and so the outcome there is the player ends up on the Patriots. Let's say the Patriots draft him. What's going to happen? The Colts don't value him enough to make any trade offers because the Patriots wouldn't accept anything under $50 million. So if the Patriots start out with a player, they keep him because the Colts don't value him enough to make an offer that's high enough to where they would trade him. If the Colts started out with the rights, started out with a player, we would see the Patriots kind of trade for that player. So this is a kind of good example of Coase's theorem. It doesn't matter who starts out with the rights. This player here is kind of like a good, right? Whoever values that good the most, or whoever values that player the most, will be the one that we see end up. Anything else I want to say here? You can do the same type of thing with any person and think about wages. What companies are going to end up with the best workers? Well, the companies that value those workers the most, right? Because the worker is always going to choose to kind of go to that company who values them the most because that company will offer them a higher wage, higher benefit package, whatever it is in terms of kind of giving that worker as high of a valuation as they possibly can. So you can kind of apply this Coase's theorem to a lot of different things. I think I'll leave it there. We'll talk about common resources Monday. So one thing we're going to do Monday is I'm not going to meet in class. Okay? So I'm going to film something, right? And I'll put up a Zoom link. So on Canvas, I'll throw up this thing, a little Zoom button on the lower left side. I'll also put up an announcement with the Zoom link. If you want to watch it synchronously on Monday during our usual time slot, you can get on Zoom and kind of watch as I'm kind of working through things. It won't be quite as long as class. It'll be probably like a 20-30 minute video. Then once it's over, right, I'll post it. So you have the choice of either hopping on Zoom at the time of class on Monday or just watching that sometime over Thanksgiving break. Okay? Any questions from me before you guys get out of here? All right, so we won't be meeting here in class Monday, so I won't see you for a while. I'll see you that Monday after Thanksgiving. Be safe. Don't do anything crazy. Work on that homework a little bit if you can, and enjoy the holidays. See ya.